Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MoPod, brought to you by MoDate, where we discuss everything Mo, from modern orthodoxy to my opinions and more. I'm your host, Evan Harris, and we have a great guest for you today. Let's get to it. Today, we're sitting down with Alex Kasdan. How are you, Kasdan?
I'm good. How are you doing today, Evan?
I'm doing well. So we're going to start off this interview with the question that we will ask everyone who is a part of this specific bundle. Will the Yeshiva League exist in 25 years?
So first off, Evan, thank you for having me on. Really do appreciate it. I think the Yeshiva League will exist in 25 years. In fact, I think it's going to be even bigger. I think it's only going to expand.
Okay, so as our resident Yeshiva League expert, as I think you would like to call yourself for the sake of this podcast, let's dive into your background.
I'll take the name.
Let's dive into your background and just get into all those hot takes that you're ready to roll out. So, did you enjoy growing up in Teaneck?
So I don't know that I'd say at the time I enjoyed growing up in Teaneck. Just for some background for everyone, I did like the basic stuff. Grew up in Teaneck, went to Frisch, went to MoPod, went to Yeshiva in Israel. I don't know that I'd say at the time I enjoyed it, but definitely like looking back, seeing that sort of the structure it provided, and the opportunities that it afforded, I definitely say looking back, I think it was a good experience. And in terms of the person I've become and the people that my friends have become, I definitely am, satisfied with it looking back.
Okay, so let's talk about Frisch for a second. How many kids were in your grade?
There were 130 of us, I think, on the dot.
Okay, would you say that everyone in your grade was pretty similar religiously in ninth grade walking into Frisch, or were there a lot of differences?
There were some disparities. I'd say in the grand scheme of the way we look about life, the way, you might view the Yeshiva League like with a lens from afar, probably most of them were pretty similar. Obviously, on either end, there were some differences, but I'd say the majority came in pretty similar.
Gotcha. So we were having this conversation in a van yesterday, right? In a Cadillac Escalade, a very nice car. And so just talking about the Yeshiva League now versus when we were in it and where we think things are going in the future. So how do you feel Frisch has changed since you left? You graduated in 2015. What do you think have been the differences in the last 7 years?
So I don't know every last detail, but from what I've heard, it's actually changed quite a bit. They were 130 in my grade, which at the time was kind of small, but they averaged like 150 a grade, so like 600 in the high school. Now there's 1,000 students in that high school. They've expanded massively. No way they could have even fit that number of students in the building. They really had to renovate. I've heard it's moved to the right. Like the types of, say, people like who do like gap years after go to yeshiva and seminary, they're going to yeshivas and seminaries that are much more to the right.
What do you mean by to the right?
For starters, they like much more yeshivish in their like orientation. Like the yeshiva I went to, that many of my fellow first students went to, was like Dati Leumi. So like they encouraged and pushed to go to the army. They're like scroogy kippah wearers, those rabbis. But that wasn't every yeshiva people went to at the time. But now, even more so, the yeshivas that people are going to, they're not encouraging the army. They're like to the right of that, right? They see more value in spending your time learning. So that's like a big difference. And I think even just the rabbis that are fresh now, obviously a lot of the ones that were there when I was there are still there, but like the ones they've hired in the interim, I hear have a more, sort of to the right orientation on those things. They were never so pro secular college, but I hear it's even less so now. For some of those rabbis, obviously it doesn't, I don't extrapolate that to the rest of the school. I'm just talking about like the rebbeim that are there. So I hear that has been a change.
Gotcha. So let's drop some names on these yeshivas you're talking about. So I don't know if you're purposely avoiding the name of Oraita, but I was there with you, so there's no reason to avoid that. I'm fully aware of where you went, and I went there also. So I'm wondering what kind of yeshivas you think people are going to now. Like, are you talking more like Shalavim, like KBY? Like, is that what?
So just 3 years after my year at first, like not like the 3 years that graduated after me. I heard that they had 8 who went to Shalvim. My year, just for reference, there were 0. There are definitely many still going to Oraita and other yeshivas with more of a Dati Leumi bent, but also ones with not that, perspective. They're definitely going to there as well.
Gotcha. So what about community vibe as a whole? So when you go back to Teaneck now, do you feel like
Oh,
the community has changed since you were living there, or do you think things are pretty much the same?
I think there's an element of things you don't really realize while you're there that are taking shape, but then when you take yourself out of the box and go back, it definitely feels different. Like if I go into any classic restaurant in Teaneck now, if I go into Dougie's on like a Sunday evening, a lot of people in black and white, maybe the majority. I don't think if when I was like going with my friends there, like 11th, 12th grade, that was the case. I really don't. Now it's possible that, you don't quite remember just the way that the community was already changing, but it really like does feel different. You go into any of the kosher grocery stores, same idea. Like I hear even like women feel this even more because like someone who like might have like worn pants like in some of these restaurants, like you feel almost funny doing that. I don't know. I can't really speak to that, but it's definitely a take I've heard.
Gotcha. So you're currently living on the Upper West Side. Would you
That's
consider
right.
moving back to Teaneck?
No, it not that it. I'm so like opposed to that. It's just, I mean, for starters, I don't think anyone uh maybe some exceptions, wants to really move back to where they grew up. But yeah, also it has moved to the right. The schools have changed a little bit to cater, a little bit to, the way that the community has become. And, not necessarily, I think, where I expect to end up, but nothing, personal about that.
Gotcha. So you recently got married, and so you're still in
Right.
kind of the living in the city stage of marriage, pre-kids and all that. And
Yep.
so I'm wondering if you think that Teaneck has moved to the right, and a lot of people who run in your circles probably might not end up in Teaneck. And I could speak for the 5 towns. Definitely feels like 5 towns are moving more to the right. Where do you think that people who used to be classic Teaneck 5 towns people will end up going?
So there's a couple different I think perspectives to that. One, I've heard like if you're staying in the tri-state area, I've heard like new places are hot. Fairlawn, I think for the type of person who has sort of the, a shkaffa that I do, that's a from what I hear, that's a hot place to go to if you're about like, high 20s, early 30s, where you've been married for a little bit, you're ready to buy a house. That's sort of a place to go. The other, I think, big thing is, I think there used to be pre-COVID, like sort of stigma about going out of town, and I think for many places that might still exist for a lot of people. But I think what we're starting to see is there's certain places that aren't necessarily going to be viewed as out of town. Obviously, that brings us to Florida. Don't think 3 years ago, like, I got brothers that are 7 years older. So they're sort of a bit ahead in terms of like this stage. Like their friends were not talking about like in 2019, like, and they had like gotten married in the past couple of years. Those people, they weren't talking about, oh, maybe we'll move to Florida, when we're ready to, really settle down with kids, buy a house. And that 3 years later, many of their friends have done that. I think that the experience of the last few years, for many reasons, has contributed to that change in perspective. And it's obviously not just Florida. There's many other places where people think that, they could build a good community. People, obviously learning to appreciate just to have good weather, jobs or remote or hybrid. Hybrid obviously means many different things, but it allows for that. So I think people who like, and I'm not someone who would have been opposed to live out of town. In fact, personally, there's things I would have liked about it, but there's places I think that aren't even going to be viewed as being, I know this is a podcast, people aren't going to be able to see me do this with my fingers. They're not going to be viewed as out of town.
Well, actually, we plan on putting this on YouTube. So if anyone watches on YouTube, then they will be able to see you do that with your fingers. And
Sounds good.
so this idea of out of town not being out of town anymore, do you think that those places will now be considered in high school as part of the Yeshiva League?
I think so. And I think you have to remember that there are different sort of, because there's just different communities of different sizes. Some places that even were town still had, like their equivalent of Frisch or Hafter had like 70 students, let's say. I think Weinbaum in Miami was sort of like that when we graduated. I think it was like 70. I think Ida Crown in Chicago was about like 65 as well. Not 100% sure, but what's going to happen when those are, the size of what Frisch or Hafter was when we graduated, like if it's going to be in one of those high schools, for fourth grade, it's going to be 600 students. That's a totally different dynamic. The community is going to develop very differently. It's not going to be, one or two shuls. There's going to be in the way that there's in Teaneck, that there's, like 20 shuls, probably in 5 towns, something like that as well, maybe even more. It's going to develop, in that sort of way as well. I think the Yeshiva League has a bright future, both in New York and out of it.
Gotcha. So the Yeshiva League, the term Yeshiva League is not just a noun, it is also an adjective.
That's
and
right.
So speaking more on the adjective of being Yeshiva League, do you think that there is such a thing now, being 7 years removed from high school? Do you think there's such a thing as being Yeshiva League after high school?
Absolutely. And I'd say each year I more and more think this. I think a lot of people, I think we all have this impulse to a degree. We want to sort of try to branch out of it, right? When we get to college, maybe we try to rush a frat, join other clubs, try to see ourselves get out of it. Everyone I know and I obviously didn't, stray so far from it, like I never did. But for those who really did, all of my friends sort of made their way back. That maybe some people, weren't like, hanging out so much in the community, whatever their community was at their school. But now that we're, mid-20s on the Upper West Side, basically everyone's back here on the Upper West Side. Some people maybe even after college tried to, go to some other neighborhood in New York City. Maybe it was Murray Hill. Maybe it was the East Village, maybe Brooklyn. Everyone's basically here who's of the demographic of person that could have been here. Obviously, you have people who, for whatever reason, found themselves in Teaneck or Riverdale, more common for married couples in both those cases. But everyone's, I know sort of found their way here. And obviously I have a very specific, group of friends, but I think that still says something that people found their way back, both religiously and socially. I think it really speaks to the power of our community.
So that's definitely, I think, a positive of this idea of being Yeshiva League. But what about the negative components? When people say, oh, they're super Yeshiva League or something like that, and just different vibes you get from people who maybe went to a school that's more Yeshiva League than your school, or that kind of idea, or the way people consider in-towners, which also kind of meant Yeshiva League people, meaner than out-of-towners. So what do you think about that? Do you think that still exists, or do you think that kind of ends when high school ends?
Unfortunately, I think that does still exist. That reputation and sort of that persona, the way that's viewed. I think we definitely all have to do better. We have to sort of be like friendly and welcoming. The Upper West Side has so many Orthodox Jews and non-Orthodox Jews. That so many people that you can meet in shul or elsewhere, and so many people you could be inclusive to, invite for a meal. That's something I think I've really realized here, the amount that some people really appreciate a meal invite, especially when it's like not from one of their close friends, like that, goes a long way. But I do have, I am nervous a bit about that I don't think that stigma so much goes away even all these years later when we're no longer in that camp or that school. We still definitely have that stigma and, we're viewed a certain way. And we definitely need to, show what we got.
How much do you think that idea is on the person who is perceived as Yeshiva League versus on the perceiver?
I think there's definitely an element that it's on the person who's perceived. So I would say to that, just be friendly, be yourself, but just be like a friendly guy, right? In terms of the perceiver, often this might be a little controversial. I think that some people who say like are trying to, portray others as Yeshiva League that's like a very yeshiva thing to say. Like
Hmm.
it's because you're operating in these circles that like you view it as, oh, he went to SAR and he's so basic and he goes to Young Israel and I like those things, and and you try to stigmatize people as being like unfriendly that way when like every individual person has the potential to be nice and outgoing, and you should extend that to them. Yeah, no, I definitely do think that sometimes people will stigmatize someone as being yeshiva when like I don't think that's the most fair criticism, because we obviously all have that background, those of us that have it, and that's our background. But I think we're still good people.
Gotcha. So you mentioned that you think Teaneck is moving more to the right and
Mm.
Frisch is moving more to the right, but the Yeshiva
So
League as a
yeah,
whole.
I think I would
uh,
just say that I know less about the specifics in Frisch than I do just being around
Gotcha,
Teaneck. But yes,
gotcha.
continue the question. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Do you think the Yeshiva League as a whole, obviously you can't speak for everyone, is becoming more or less from?
Oof. Well, there's two different questions. There's the question of, do I think they're becoming more religious? And I don't think that's universally the case. But I think there is sort of the potential for it to be more, getting in at the box of our community, being somewhat more insular that way, because as the community gets bigger, you're able to just interact with it more. I think that, that those impulses definitely do exist everywhere. As I was saying before, when, it's not just going to be Hafter and Frisch and SAR that have over 100 students in the grade. It's going to be all these other places. And I think that will, you know, have an impact. Will it necessarily make it more from? I don't know.
Gotcha. And after Frisch, now in this stage you're in, do you notice a shift in either direction in terms of the people you were with in high school? Do you think people, now that we're pretty far removed from Israel as well, do you think most of your friends are where they were in high school religiously, less from, more from? How do you view that?
So the first thing I want to say is people often move together. Obviously, you have people who do their own thing and don't move with their friends, but I think like generally people sort of are doing what their friends and group is doing. So yeah, there was like a point, going to Israel and the first year or so out where people were definitely more religious than they were in high school. That's definitely come down. I will say that I personally like to I enjoy seeing the person that many of these people have become, that they're really what they're doing in either direction, whether it's more or less than their parents. You enjoy people making deliberate decisions, and you're able to find them more interesting that way, that they're not just doing what their parents did or what, they just, everyone had to do, that they're sort of living an independent life, even among the community. But I would say people are probably a little less than they were in high school, but I don't know if that's because they actually are or because they're able to do that now because they're not living in their parents' house.
Gotcha.
So in
Gotcha.
that sense, it's hard to quantify.
So I know you have some hot takes on the matter, but just wanted to drop one by you, see what your opinions are. So it kind of seems like the Yeshiva League system is built to have kids not sway too far from religion until
Mm-hmm.
they get to Israel, but not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily get more into religion before they get to Israel, and then kind of just lean on Israel to have people either maintain what they had in high school for the rest of their life or get more into religion. So I'm wondering what you think about that system and if you think it's sustainable or you think that maybe these institutions and well, you said you don't know too much about the institutions, but maybe institutions moving more to the right earlier, or maybe just adopting this Israel mentality that kind of spurs more seemingly enjoyment from Torah and learning and Judaism as a whole earlier on.
I think there's only so much you can do earlier on, and part of that is because it's hard to get kids who are literally kids into it. If you're in middle school, early high school, you don't want to, it fosters a dynamic. You don't want to like be more frum than your parents. You don't want to be more frum than your friends. It's difficult. What the year in Israel provides, and I think there's many challenges and questions to it. I really don't think it's a perfect system, but it provides people to sort of get out of that comfort zone. You're literally living in a country you've never lived in before. You're dorming. You haven't done that before because you haven't done college. It provides those opportunities, and I don't think the year in Israel was great for everyone. I mean, it clearly wasn't, and people had not good experiences. But I think that it clearly has a high success rate. I just, off the top of my head, and obviously I don't know every intimate detail about what every person does. If there were 130 people in my first grade, I think about 110 of them are still, operating in the modern Orthodox community. That's like their, community. And that's a ridiculously high success rate. That's not 50%. That's not even 70%. That's way higher than that. And that's very impressive. And that speaks to, the potential that the way we set up this community has. Obviously, that's not every grade and that's not every school. But maybe, I don't know, do you see that in Hafter? Is most people still living in this community?
It's interesting. I'm not sure exactly the numbers, and I'm wondering if you want to ballpark guess what percentage 110 out of 130 is, and then we can look it up and see if you were correct.
110 out of 130, I want to say, is about 84%.
I was also going to say 84%. Let's see what it is. Very exciting. I'm not liking this calculator app right now. It's not giving me it's not giving me accurate. 110 divided by 130 equals 84.6%. All right, very close.
Wow. And to think I got a 1, not just on the Calc AP, but that was the BC. That was BC, and then you have the AB sub score. I still got a 1 once they did that. To think anyway.
That sounds like a waste of a year to me. Anyway, so what are your hottest takes about the Yeshiva League and the future of the Yeshiva League and where you think things are going?
I think I don't know that these are hot, but I think that the insularity is, an asset. I don't think we should be unfriendly. I don't think we should not try to branch out and meet other kinds of people. But the fact that we have this, it's honestly so powerful. I can't tell you how many people that I speak to that, loved, like non-Orthodox Jews, loved their time in college. Maybe they were in a frat, whatever, they found their community, right? Anyone I talk to now that is not doing this, right? Maybe they're living in Chelsea, I don't know, and they don't have anything to do on the weekends. I know every single week, and every single week, you're going to have a great Shabbos, and you're probably going to have a great Saturday night as well. We just have that group of people, that community that, we're enjoying ourselves, and we're meeting new people, by the way. Because like the Upper West Side is so big that I meet new people all the time that I didn't know before. I think the fact that we have this, and even the fact that it has, sort of its barriers that keep it insular, really is, it is an asset. And I'm not, I think that there's ways to expand that for people to get more people involved, but I definitely think that is something. Yeah,
for sure. I totally agree. I think my first year on the Upper West Side was probably like my highest rate of meeting new people in a given year, just like from being here and through Modate. I think probably either that or Israel like met the most amount of people in a given year. Anyway, we're going to move on to one of our segments here. Let me paint you a picture, but for this specific Yeshiva Week bundle, it's going to be a little different. I'm going to give you a few categories, and you're going to tell me how to build the perfect Yeshiva League school. I'm going to give you academics, sports, college guidance, religiosity, and school spirit. And you're going to tell me like, oh, I'll take Frisch is this and Hafter's that, and that's how we're going to build.
I like this. I like this a lot.
Kind of like building like the perfect quarterback, how they do that with different quarterbacks. Yeah. So for academics, out of all the Yeshiva League schools, Which one would you
Okay.
choose?
I just can I ask a quick question? Is that including
Sure.
like the Judaics as well when you say academics? Or not?
We're gonna put Judaics as part of religiosity. So no.
Okay. Okay. So then in that case, I'm gonna say Ramaz for academics.
Okay, that's a pretty easy pick. I would say. You want to expound further on that one?
I mean, they are a prep school. They are able to get many of their students into top colleges. They should be lauded for that. Yeah.
Sure. So we're gonna just lump together academics and college guidance then, and give that one to Ramaz. Okay. What about
Yeah.
sports?
Sports. So I'm tempted to say Frisch because I don't know about. You know what I'm actually going to say? I'm going to say that maybe not when we think about every day. I'm going to say TABC. They take it seriously. Ball, soccer, TABC hockey is legit. I don't know if you remember, but I'm going to say TABC for that.
Okay. Sports TABC. What about Judaics and religiosity?
So the problem with this one is I think this depends sort of on your hashkafa a little bit. I'm going to say SAR because I think they have, sort of a bit of a diversity with their Judaic studies staff. Very intelligent, Rebbeim, by the way. And I sort of like what that has to offer, but I think that sort of depends on what's hashkafa there.
Gotcha. What about school spirit?
I gotta go Frisch with the Sharia. I mean, that's a week of just being rah about the place. I gotta go for it. The other thing is the way Eula comes into Sarachek. I think that deserves an honorable mention.
Okay, so Alex Kasdan's ideal Yeshiva League school would have the academics of Ramaz, the athletics of TABC, the Judaics of SAR, and the school spirit of Frisch.
Sounds good.
You proud about that? You happy with that?
I'm satisfied with that.
Okay, moving on to the MoPod lightning round. You know how this works?
You say something and I say the first word that comes to mind.
Well, it's a question. It's not just like, those pictures.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. What is the most Yeshiva League school?
Most Yeshiva. Hafter.
Okay. All right. Where would you rather raise a family? Five Towns or Teaneck?
Teaneck.
What is the kosher food capital of North America? Which community?
Teaneck.
That's okay. You're very biased. Okay. Upper West Side or downtown?
For now, or just
In general.
I'm gonna say, I mean, I'm given my age, 25, I'm gonna say Upper West Side.
Mozilla Firefox or Internet Explorer?
Wow. I'm gonna say Firefox.
Icy Tower or computer pinball?
Computer pinball.
How much do you think the average person sneezes in a day?
9 times.
No, that's way too high.
I don't know.
The average person sneezes maybe once or twice. Okay. Hey, thank you, Alex Kasdan, for coming on the MoPod. Anything else you want our listeners to know before we sign off?
No, not really. Just keep pumping the volume.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Pump the volume.